what's up all you nerds and virgins?
Colby Chaos Covington! Big shots! One back! Oh, nice back fist! Tight. He's gonna get the tap here. And there it is!
Colby Covington might be one of the biggest stars in the sport of mixed martial arts, but in recent times, it has been hard to shake the feeling that he's losing his touch. Sure, when Colby talks, people listen.
Talking shit, saying I wasn't about that life in the media, I'd be down, but again, you're nothing more than Tyron Woodley's water boys.
But a fighter's worth is truly measured by their work inside the octagon. And as things stand, Colby isn't really putting in those minutes inside the cage. He hasn't beaten a legitimate top-ranked opponent in quite some time. Over the past 5 years, he beat Rafael dos Anjos, which was back in 2018. He then beat an aging Robbie Lawler in 2019, before getting finished in a thrilling matchup with Kamaru Usman. Even in defeat, Covington's star power had never been greater. But the 2 wins he's gotten since, a TKO by rib injury against the ghost of Tyron Woodley, and a decision over a fighter who dropped him in Jorge Masvidal. Yeah, it's not exactly the type of form that screams future champion. And while most people have done a U-turn on Colby and actually enjoy his character these days, it's getting pretty clear that we need to see more activity from him. But to understand what Colby's lacking, you gotta take a look at the genesis of his character. Because it's hard to talk about Colby Covington without talking about his controversial persona. The UFC welterweight fighter has made a name for himself with his abrasive comments, provocative behavior, an unapologetic support of Donald Trump. But where did this persona come from? And how did it help propel Covington from a relatively unknown fighter to a bankable star contender in one of the UFC's most competitive weight classes? According to Covington, the persona was born out of necessity. In the early years of his UFC career, he struggled to gain traction with fans and media alike. Despite racking up wins and climbing the rankings, he felt like he was being overlooked and underappreciated. In an interview with ESPN, Covington claimed that he was in danger of being cut from the UFC altogether, and that he knew he needed to do something to stand out and get people talking. That's when he says he decided to adopt a more abrasive persona. He started trash-talking his opponents, making outlandish claims, and generally doing whatever it took to get attention.
I only got one stipulation. Let the whole world watch. We don't have to be in an octagon. We can go to a park and we can do it. Let the whole world watch and, let them enjoy themselves.
At first, the approach was met with mixed results. Some fans and media members found Covington's antics amusing, while others found them off-putting and disrespectful. But over time, Covington's persona began to resonate with a certain segment of the MMA fan base. He became a lightning rod for controversy, generating headlines and sparking heated debates online. And as he continued to rack up wins in the octagon, his profile grew even larger. By 2018, he was one of the UFC's top-ranked welterweights, with a record of 13-1. But it wasn't just Covington's persona that was getting attention. He was also making headlines for his close ties to Donald Trump and his support of the president's policies. Covington has been vocal in his support of Trump, appearing at rallies and events alongside the president, and even receiving a call from him after one of his fights.
You look great. You look fantastic.
Thank you, Mr.
And take care of yourself, okay?
Thank you so much, Mr.
For some fans, this was a turnoff. They saw Covington's support of Trump as a cynical ploy to gain attention and further his own career. But for others, it was a sign of authenticity. They saw Covington as a fighter who was unafraid to speak his mind and stand up for what he believed in, even if it meant alienating some fans and colleagues. And in the end, it's hard to argue with Covington's success. Despite the controversy surrounding his persona and political views, he has continued to win fights and climb the rankings in the UFC's welterweight division. In 2019, he faced off against rival fighter Kamaru Usman in a highly anticipated title fight. Despite putting up a valiant effort, Covington ultimately lost to Usman via TKO in the 5th round. But even in defeat, Covington's stock continued to rise. His performance in the fight was widely praised, and many fans and analysts felt that he had solidified his status as one of the UFC's top welterweight. Colby's offensive character has indeed helped him stand out in a crowded field of talented fighters, but after a while, it's starting to sound like a broken record. Okay, we understand that Covington was thrown off course by that bizarre sucker punching incident involving his former friend-turned-enemy be Jorge Masvidal, but despite the existence of way more deserving contenders than him, the UFC kind of alienated large portions of the fan base by very clearly stating that Colby is next for the champ Leon Edwards. Even Leon doesn't want to give Covington that shine when guys like Gilbert Burns, Belal Muhammad, and even Khamzat Chimaev are far more deserving. Dana White, who famously doesn't make fights on Fight Night, had a very strange insistence that Colby was next, just minutes after Leon Edwards had beaten Kamaru Usman in their trilogy fight. He wasn't talking anything other than a Colby title shot as a possibility. Seems weird, doesn't it? Sure, it'd be a big fight, but it's just unusual for Dana to be so adamant about a fighter getting a title shot so soon after a fight is finished, especially considering that he hasn't exactly beaten a top 5 guy in years. Maybe it has something to do with that whole legal case with Masvidal. You know, maybe the UFC are doing Covington a solid to get him to drop the whole thing, to not bring too much bad media attention on the sport. Let's not rule it out anyway. The UFC has granted Covington a major privilege by allowing him to sit out and wait for a title shot. This move has sparked a debate about whether or not Covington deserves special treatment, and whether or not the UFC is playing favorites. Some fans argue that Covington has earned his shot at the title, and that he should be given the opportunity to fight Edwards on the back of his star power and his work over the years, the close fights with the former pound-for-pound #1 Kamaru Usman. They point to his impressive record and his status as one of the top-ranked welterweights in the UFC and greatest 170-pounders of his era. But others see it as a sign of privilege and entitlement. They argue that Covington should have to earn his title shot like everyone else, and that he shouldn't be given special treatment just because of his controversial persona and good standing with his employers. And it's not just fans who are speaking out against Covington's decision. Fellow fighters have also voiced their opinions on the matter. Gilbert Burns, who is currently ranked #2 in the welterweight division, has been particularly vocal in his criticism of Covington. He has argued that Covington should have to fight someone like him or Belal Muhammad before getting a shot at the title. Muhammad, who is currently ranked #6, has also taken shots at the UFC for Covington's decision. He has called for the UFC to make Covington fight a contender before granting him a title shot. Belal is a guy who certainly knows a thing or two about getting overlooked for a deserved step up in competition. The controversy surrounding Covington's decision to sit out and wait for a title shot against Edwards is just the latest in a long line of controversies for the fighter. And while some fans continue to support him, others are beginning to turn on him, seeing his entitled behavior as a sign of weakness. Only time will tell how this situation plays out, but one thing is clear: Covington's decision has sparked a debate about privilege and entitlement in the UFC, and it's a debate that's likely to continue for some time. So, what should the UFC do with Colby if they were to pass him up for a title shot? Well, we have some ideas. Here are 3 potential fights for Covington that could help him earn his title shot. First, you could take the obvious route and give him Gilbert Burns. These two have recent wins over Jorge Masvidal and have been taking jabs at each other on social media, making this a great potential grudge match. And a win over him would undoubtedly put Covington back in the title conversation. He's also slowly working up a reputation as a fight anyone, anywhere, anytime kind of fighter. He was the only guy calling out Khamzat Chimaev during his rise, and their eventual fight made it clear that Burns is an absolute warrior in every sense of the word. Another top 5 opponent that Covington could face is Belal Muhammad. Muhammad has been on a tear lately, winning his last 4 fights, including a dominant performance against top prospect Sean Brady. And a win over him would be a solid addition to Covington's resume, an actual top 5 opponent. Both guys are within touching distance of the belt, and to be honest, Belal could really use an opponent like Colby to bring some fan attention to his fights. In a matchup with chaos, there's a good chance that Muhammad would be the good guy in many people's eyes, giving him the type of role that he's just not going to get facing these other contenders. Purists understand just how good he is, but his fighting style isn't exactly fan-friendly. And finally, while not a top 5 opponent, the #6 ranked Shavkat Rakhmonov is a rising star in the welterweight division and has the potential to be a tough test for Covington. If he does take a fight with this insanely fun contender, it will earn Colby a lot of good faith, even from his haters. Rakhmonov is undefeated in his professional career with 17 finishes and 17 victories, and after his fight of the night winning showdown with Jeff Neal, his stock is in a great place. A win over Rakhmonov would not only add another name to Covington's resume, but it could also help him gain momentum and earn the confidence of the hardcore fans who truly believe that Shavkat is on his way to a title. At the very least, this fight would be a lot of fun. Colby's in a tough spot right now. Virtually no one wants him to fight for the belt except Dana and his team. And if Leon does go out there and beat him, which is likely, he's going to be in an even rougher position. The ideal route here is to slow things down. Let Leon have a more deserving contender, and if Colby is truly worthy of another title shot, let him earn it. Because if he can beat any of those names, his star power would benefit hugely.